Good morning and welcome back to Fiction Author Business School. So today and actually next week too, I'm going to be giving you some live coaching sessions. This is a coaching that I did with my friend Mallory, who gave me permission to put it on the podcast. And it ended up being really, really long. So that's why I'm splitting it into two podcast episodes. I know you guys aren't crazy about the longer episodes. Also understand that most of my coaching is not quite this meandering. This was her trying to figure out her book and me trying to structure my coaching calls. And so we were kind of helping each other with that. And I mentioned that at some point that I need a little more structure on my calls, but she helped me with that. But I think it's a really good, even so, example of the kind of coaching I do and how I can help you figure out your story. And it's really fun to hear Mallory have some really big light bulb moments on her story as well. Now, I did originally attempt to go through and divided up by what we were talking about, because we talk about the end of her story, we talk about figuring out the inciting incident, we talk about a couple of other just kind of character related things. But when I this is what I mean when I say I needed a little more structure. When I tried to pick through it and categorize, it just wasn't working. There was too much that was connected and too much that we would go back and forth about things. So I finally decided to just kind of scrap that, and I just divided it into part 1 and part 2. So you can hear the conversation and the way it progresses from beginning to end, even if we jump around on the subject matter a little bit. The other thing I wanted to say is that Mallory and I are actually in the same critique group. So if you're wondering how I know so much about her characters and about her story, and I'm just pulling things out of thin air, that is because she's working on planning book 3 during this coaching call. And being in her critique group, I have already read the vast majority of books 1 and 2. So that's why I know a lot about her story and her characters. And you'll also notice that we giggle a lot, and that's because we're buddies and we giggle about stuff. So anyway, all that said, I think that our conversation here gives a lot of great insights into how to plan your characters, how to plan your climactic moment and your ending, as well as your inciting incident. And I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy it. If you haven't listened to part 1 of the interview, I would recommend going back to last week and listening to that first. And with all of that said, here is part 2.
I love getting into a story and realizing, oh, I didn't have this as well thought out as I thought.
Well, and usually if you're floundering a little bit, that's usually the case, because if you had it all nailed down, you wouldn't be going, why is this not working?
Right. And so I knew I had your voice in my head saying, it's because you don't have clarity on what you're doing. I was like, I know, Liesl, help me. Okay, yeah. So one thing I am playing with that climactic moment, I really like that you said, like when Dax is doing all these surgeries and stuff, that I see something, because I'm trying to figure out, like, what is he going to learn? He has to learn something while he's there that's going to benefit this whole situation later. Otherwise, yay, he led the people to safety and they're fine now. Doesn't quite go with everything as well as it could. I mean, it's fine, but it's not as good as and as strong as it could be. So because there is that moment in book 2 where, so when he touches her, she has clarity, even with the heart still inside her. And so it's going to be something like that with the end too. There was like this point where they were fighting and it like created this dome and kind of a shield around them. But I don't know, because I want him to kind of see something in her as well, where he realizes he can manipulate the heart right back and kind of rearrange her cells or whatnot just by controlling the heart. But I don't know what that looks like. I don't know.
Okay, exactly. So I had an idea, and I don't want to totally rewrite your story or anything.
It's okay.
But what if it's like, what if you have something at the beginning, except he's not going to be there. Okay, whenever they come together. And what about Sean? Can Sean do the same thing, or just Dax can do it, right?
Just Dax, yeah. Because they think Sean is the one who can do this, because his parents extracted the heart from his cells, and he no longer has like anything with it. So basically all he can do is cut off Cameron's connection to the heart, which I will be using in like the experiments and stuff.
Wait, Sean can do that, or Dax can do that?
Sean can do that. So
what's the difference between, what do you mean he can cut off her connection? Like, what's the difference between that and what Dax does?
So Sean just basically cuts off all connection whatsoever, and she just feels like kind of a weak little human when he touches her. And then when it's Dax, she can see both sides. She can see her own thoughts, she can see the heart's thoughts, and she can kind of navigate her way through them.
Okay.
Where none is over, it's just all like this intense form of clarity.
So what if, and you might even have to go back and change something, but what if it's more like the heart, because you said the heart rails against Dax, doesn't want him because he can beat it. So what if your inciting incident was her working with Sean and suddenly having that epiphany that it's not Sean that they need, it's Dax? I was going to say, you could even, if you wanted to, go back, and I was thinking maybe you could, when that moment happens in book 2, maybe she pulls back from it for some reason. Like maybe there's pain involved or something, and she's like, oh, that was not good. But then she realizes at this point that that was the heart giving her pain so that she wouldn't want it. But she kind of comes to realize that Dax is what she needs to beat the heart. Meanwhile, the heart is purposely trying to separate them. That's why it's sending mimics after Dax. That's why it's, what else did you say that made me think of that? They're, oh, okay, because if the heart is trying to separate them, then it could be them trying to get back to each other throughout the whole book. And maybe they do briefly, but whatever pushes them apart again or whatever. But so I actually have this at the end of book 2 of Intercon. I have this part where it doesn't really have anything to do with power necessarily, but they're just actually physically trying to get to each other. And it's literally across this chasm that, you know, like they're reaching for each other's hands. And it's like, oh, you know, they can't quite get there, you know?
Yes.
And so you could do something like that where I'm thinking of the climactic moment where she's fighting the heart. Maybe she's losing. And he's trying to get to her, and the mimics are trying to keep him away, and the heart's trying to keep her over there because the heart, I don't know, something about how if the heart can accomplish this, then maybe Cameron really will be gone, or, you know what I mean? It really will either kill her or fully control her or whatever. And he just has to get to her and touch her to give her the clarity she needs to overcome it, or something like that.
Yeah, no, that could work.
Because that, I guess the one thing we haven't really talked about is the villain and what the villain's up to. And so we need to know, that's the other thing you probably need to figure out, what specifically is the heart trying to accomplish in this book?
So it just wants to claim all living things. So I have a parallel between what the heart wants and what Cameron wants. And the heart, I mean, it thinks it wants community and love and independence, which are things, I mean, Cameron wants community and love as well. But what the heart really wants is just to control all living things, and calls it peace, calls it community, calls it strength. But it's really just control.
So why does the heart need Cameron to do that specifically?
Because it's not independent. It doesn't have mobility. Okay. So it can't reach everyone. But if it can get control of Cameron, then Cameron can reach everyone.
Okay.
Where it can't do it on its own.
Yeah. So I'm also thinking maybe you need to have some element where Cameron is becoming like the heart, like in some way tries to control people, tries to force them to do something, is going, no, you don't understand, this is for the good. But then she'll kind of realize she's doing the same thing. And if she doesn't do that, if she kind of lets people have a little more freedom and uniqueness, that's what will end up making a good difference, you know?
And therefore also proving humanity is not weakness. It is strength.
Well, you know what, you might even want to throw something in there about how control is not strength. People think it is, but the heart is so weak, it has to control people or it's nothing, you know? So control is actually weakness, not strength.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think how you could incorporate that into the climactic moment. Like in some way have her show that it is the control that ends up being the heart's downfall, or you know what I mean, that the control is the weakness. And but I don't know how you would show that. Maybe because the heart controls the mimics, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. I'm trying to think. It's just the spark of an idea. But because when the heart is basically contained, Cameron, in a way, and I haven't really gone into this, I kind of touched on it in book 2, but haven't explored it because I haven't needed to yet. But in this book, I'm going to. So Cameron kind of becomes like the pseudo boss because she has so much of the heart's energy running through her that it becomes like everything she touches are what the mimics can become. And so I kind of did this in the cave scene in book 2 where they were turning into scorpions, turning into cacti, like things like that. And I don't remember where I was going with this, but I had a point. So with control, if they find some way to suppress the heart in some way, and Cameron is able to like release their control and gives them kind of free will in a way, then they can also kind of find their way out of
what if yeah, I was just thinking, what if she, because she's taking on attributes of the heart, what if she starts controlling them, realizes she can control them like the heart does, and kind of starts doing that because and for good, to make sure they're not killing her people, to you know what I mean, doing what needs to be done. But then she realizes if she, like you said, if she sets them free, what if as soon as she sets them free, they turn back into humans or start their mimicness sort of goes away, and then they might turn and help her against the heart because they don't want to be controlled by the heart, and so that would go to the theme that control is not strength, the control is the weakness, and as soon as she stopped controlling them, they gave her the strength she needed to whatever it is, take the heart or save her people or whatever.
Yes. I've dabbled in these thoughts and I have like little scenes created here and there, and I forgot about that one. Yes, I will incorporate that because that makes a lot of sense. I feel like the little pieces I have just floating around in the ether are collecting in the right ways instead of floating. Yes, I like this. Yeah, I never put that scene and that idea with this control idea, and I love it.
And that's, actually, I've done that before. Sometimes it's good to try and combine ideas because they can start to click together in ways you didn't think of before.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting how so many story ideas do work. Sometimes you just have to think about them differently or combine them with a different thought, and suddenly they start to grow.
Yeah. I did that with time periods when I was writing Kremlins, or well, when I was coming up, I shouldn't say I was writing it, I was coming up with the idea for Kremlins, and I had the basic gist of what the characters would be. Like I knew I wanted it to be a multi-generational thing where something happened with the parents and then the main characters were the kids trying to figure out what happened back then. And I kept trying to, I knew it was going to be in Russia, but I kept trying to set it in the communist era. And I kept hitting walls. I'd be like, no, that won't work because of this. Okay, what if I do this? No, that's still not working. You know what I mean? And I did that for like 2 or 3 days. And then I just like picked the whole thing up and put it back in the time of Ivan the Terrible, and it was perfect. It just like clicked everywhere. And I was like, there it is. Why am I trying to write about communism? I like the medieval period better anyway.
Oh, I love it when a plan comes together.
All right. Well, what else? Anything else you want to work on?
Those were my big things. I mean, I really need to come up with that inciting incident. And thank you for the clarity on that, because I was really like, how is this different than because in my head it wasn't any different from the transition from Act 1 to Act 2. And I was like, I feel like that's too late for the inciting incident to come around. So
right. Well, and sometimes it helps to look at, what was I thinking was the inciting incident there? Like, because there is a big incident from Act 1 to Act 2. And it's usually the thing that really knocks them out of their safe space and into like a quest or a journey or an adventure or whatever the case may be. But yeah, it's not quite the same thing as the inciting incident. So like, I always think about like Star Wars, A New Hope. The inciting incident isn't even actually with Luke. It's the beginning when the plans for the Death Star, when they're trying to get him and they get into the escape pod, but it's going to affect him, even though that's not happening with him, because that's what kicks off the story.
Right.
The whole thing is about trying to find those plans, you know. The point you're talking about from Act 1 to Act 2 is when his guardians are killed, because at that point he goes off planet, you know, he completely, it turns his world upside down. So I think that we can kind of mix them up sometimes. So like with you, you know, whatever the inciting incident ends up being, the jump from Act 1 to Act 2 might be when she actually leaves the facility, if that's only going to be the first third, you know, or when something, because whatever they're starting out doing, which is them being in the facility doing these tests, it has to kind of knock them out of their orbit, you know, into something completely different. And that's when you head into Act 2. So anyway, yeah.
Yes.
So I guess I should do a podcast on the inciting incident.
You know, it's so funny because you can see it when you read other books, when you know the character gets new information, when you know, just, and it's always kind of subtle because it happens so quickly. But you can see it in other people's works. But for some reason, when I am writing my own, it's like, did it happen? Like, please tell me it happened, because I don't know if it did. And sometimes I worry about, is it happening too early? Is it happening too late? You know, are we meandering in this world before for way too long before anything actually happens? Or does enough happen? Did I put it in there and not notice it? You know? So
yeah. Well, I think a lot of times we're kind of natural storytellers. So sometimes we do put it in and don't know it, you know?
Yeah.
I had people tell me that the first time I ever taught it was 9 plot points back then. I had so many people come up to me and go, oh, I like ran back to my hotel room so that I could see if I had them all. And then most of them did. They already had them. They just hadn't recognized them. And I'm going, well, yeah, of course, because you're all storytellers. Like we kind of have an intuitive idea of what needs to go into it, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. I got myself into a mess when I tried to make 4 chapters into a whole book.
So I did that with Dragon Magic. I tried to make a 7,000 word story into this whole thing. So it's taken me so long to figure it all out. It's like, oh, okay, that's a problem. No, actually going back to read it though, there's a lot of things that I'd forgotten about that I put in the beginning that I need to like sort of follow up with. And that's a good thing because it'll help me fill out stuff later on. So I'm like, oh yeah, huh. Okay, so I need to figure that out, and you know, stuff like that. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll figure that out. I have chapter 1 ready to go for writers group, so we'll see.
Good.
We'll see how it goes. Somehow I managed to get, you know, 3,300 words together to create a chapter. So
nice.
I'll take it.
Are you sending that this week?
Yeah, I'm just going over crutch words and just throwing it at the wall to see what happens and go from there. But yeah, I'm gonna play with this inciting incident. So it's probably good. I mean, both characters need one, so I'll need to make sure I have one for Dax too.
So where is he? You said he said he's back at. I mean, maybe the inciting incident could be for him like I said, either something he realizes doing a surgery, or maybe even the introduction of the serum, if you're doing the serum with him.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to do the serum with her instead?
Probably with her.
Okay.
And it's one that's already created. So I'm kind of using it as more of a turning point during Act 2.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to
Which
ask you
will,
about is, what about Dax and Sean? I mean, where do they stand in all of this? Do you have a brother issue going on?
yeah, yeah. Um, kind of, I need to figure out their relationship because originally, I mean, I didn't have Felix abduct Sean, so it was just Cameron, but then I
Mm-hmm.
changed that. And I think it's stronger this way. But originally I had like Dax and Sean like at each other's throats while they're going through all of these things, trying to find Cam, trying to keep the people safe and everything. So now he and Cyan are butting heads the whole time.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so I do need to bring that relationship back in and make it meaningful. I feel like I'm floundering in some of the relationships. I keep getting other people lost. They
Yeah.
keep going away. So I need to bring them back in.
Mm. Well,
Which
if you have loose ends that you're not sure how to tie up, then go to those relationships and see if you can make them into subplots, you know.
yes. Yeah, I'm gonna play with this. I have a lot to play with. The first book had only 3 characters. Well, 4. It had 4, but because
Like,
it was still a character in book 1. But
and by play with, you mean bash your head against the wall.
yeah, yeah.
I have a note here. I wrote down something that Kella said. She was talking about little in-betweeny chapters, and I wrote that down. Like, only an author knows what little in-betweeny chapters
I
are.
know.
Everyone else would be like, what?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely need to play with. I've been so concerned about keeping like Cam and Sean a friendship and Dax and Cyan just a friendship and not mingle the waters because the romance author inside me wants to do weird things and I'm just not going to do that. So this is not that book. So I've been so focused on just building friendships and not any sort of romantic relationships between them and keeping it between Cameron and Dax because that's where it needs to happen because that's how um the climactic moment comes about and everything is them
Yeah,
together.
right. You could friend zone all of them so that they're like talking to each other about the relationships,
Mm-hmm.
you
I
know.
think I'm going to do that.
I still remember my brother coming to me. It was like, I think it was before his mission, and he liked this girl who was in his ward. And he was like, "So, can I ask you a question?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "If a girl talks to you about her boyfriend and is like kind of bashing him and telling you what she's frustrated with him about, does that mean she likes you?" And I was going, "That means you're kind of in the friend zone." And he was like,
Definitely in this phase.
and it's all right. I think she kind of went off the deep end later, and he's married to a wonderful woman now. So
There we go. It all worked out.
yeah, but I remember him saying that and just going, "Hate to break it to you, bud, but
I don't think so.
you're friend zoned." Mm.
Yeah, so I think I will be doing plenty of that. There's plenty of time for communications like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Me too. Yeah, I'm excited to get it figured out. And I'm trying not to be scared to just draft and play around with things.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times that's where, for me, a lot of things get figured out is when I have a direction and I just start drafting, then a lot of the other little things fall into place.
Yeah.
So
Good.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep going through your worksheets because they are very helpful. And I probably did too much in one day. So I might need to go through a couple of them again. But I did 4 of them yesterday.
Mm.
And I had like 8,000 words between the 4 of them. And I was like,
Wow.
I did a lot of talking and I'm not quite sure what I came up with. So.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
But I mean, it was good to just kind of think through some things because some things did come to light. So
good.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes good to do it more than once because you'll discover different things and
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so weird coming to this book after book 2 because the original draft was pretty much all book 2. So I had so much of it already figured out, and coming to this one, it's like, oh, I have to figure things out.
Well, and weren't you the one that were saying that you were afraid of the ending or afraid of ending? Yeah. Do you have a lot of series that you have read? I mean, that are finished?
Yes.
Okay. I would do that. I would reread those because I had that issue. I don't know what I was trying to finish. I mean, I was going to say it was probably Intercon, except I haven't actually finished Intercon, but I do know how it's going to finish. But yeah, because my series, that one, it's when did he come out with the last book? I don't think I actually have the last book here. It started in 1990, and I didn't start reading it until 10 years later. I mean, I was in high school when I started reading these. I want to say it might have been 2013, the last one came out. This is just the jacket, so it doesn't actually have the date on it. So yeah, anyway, the point is it was like a 25-year series, and there's 14 books, and it's just super epic. They're all that thick, Anderson type books. And I remember thinking, I am not going to be able to figure out how to finish one of my series until I get the end of the series. Like I need to see it finish. I don't even care how it finishes. I just need to see it finish, And then he did. And it was a wonderful ending. It was better than I could have hoped for, honestly. And then after that, I felt okay finishing my series. So I think it helps to read and analyze how people have finished their series and, really just think through it. Okay, how did they wrap up that character arc? Okay, how did they deal with this dilemma that was like going on throughout the entire series? You could say that about Harry Potter too. How after all that buildup, you got to pay it off or you're going to just royally piss everyone off,
Right. That's a good idea. I'll return to some of my favorite endings and see what happens. I have one trilogy that I'm just waiting for the book on. So that'll be interesting to see. Read it with a more analytical eye. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think of one that I really love the ending. I always love book 2 the most. And so I always kind of dwell on book 2.
Yeah.
I'm that weird person who likes the middle drama more so than how it wraps up.
No, there's been some books I really liked book 2. I can't say that of Wheel of Time because there were 14 books. So it's like, well, book 2 wasn't really the middle.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about before we hop off?
I think that's everything. I think I have plenty to think about.
Okay.
So, for the inciting incident, where do you recommend? What % of the way through do you recommend that goes in?
I mean, it's really early on. So I don't know. I've never really thought about it in terms of percentages. I would have I would say within the first few chapters, at least. I mean,
Okay.
if you could possibly get it into the first chapter, that would be best. But if you can't,
Okay.
I don't know. It also depends. The thing is, sometimes different things can be considered the inciting incidents. So, for example, Wheel of Time, the really big inciting incident doesn't happen till like chapter 8 or something. But this is also a book that has 75 chapters. So percentage-wise, it's still pretty early on.
Right.
And in the first few chapters, there are things that are happening that are interesting, that we're like, this is different. We're meeting something new. This is not status quo. You know what I mean? And those technically could be considered like an inciting incident. So I don't know. It kind of depends on how you look at it.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better that you said the first chapter, because I feel like sometimes I'm just ready to, jump right in, or it happens in the first chapter and I don't necessarily mean for it to, and I worry about it being too early. So, okay. All right. I won't stress too much about it then.
Yeah. No. Well, and I mean, really, because I feel like a lot of times it happens at the end of the first chapter, because first chapter, you're just kind of introducing the world and kind of grounding them in the character. And then once you've done that, something happens, that kind of kicks everything off. So, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I think it's more dangerous to put it too late than to put it too early.
Noted. Okay. Yeah, I know I worried about that with my first book too, but I was like, I don't know how else I can do this. And there was a long prologue too, so I didn't feel like it was too bad to put it at the end of chapter 1, but okay. All right. Well, that helps me feel better.
Cool.
All right. Well, I have plenty to work on, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, I am too. I was gonna say, I need to figure out how to structure my calls a little bit better. I feel like we sit down and just kind of, okay, how about this? How about that? And I need to come up with a better structure for them, but.
Well, and I was all over the place because I was like, all the things are wrong.
Said every writer ever, so. No, I told you the story about Tolkien and Lewis, right? Did I tell you that?
I don't know.
So C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were buddies and helped each other with their writing. Like they were like literally in a writer's group together, like ours. And I heard this at there was like a Tolkien expert at one of the, I think it was LTUE, which we got LTUE in like February of 2020, like barely before the lockdowns happened. It's like, wow, we were lucky to get that in, Anyway, they told this story about how Tolkien wrote The Hobbit first, and then they wanted him to write something else. And so he was trying to write Lord of the Rings, which is totally wild to me that he wrote them in that order. I would have thought Lord of the Rings would be first.
Right.
But he was writing it and he couldn't get it off the ground. He was having such a hard time with it. And he had like the beginning part at the Shire, and he had like up until Frodo had left the Shire, and then he just had no idea what to do with it. And you know that scene where they're under the tree hiding from the Black Rider? Originally, that was Gandalf. He had Gandalf on the horse looking for them, and it was different. And so he was talking to C.S. Lewis, his buddy, about this, and was going, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know where I'm going. It's not exciting. I don't know what to do. And C.S. Lewis said, well, that's because he said, you're not putting him in an exciting situation. And he was going, well, what do you mean? And he goes, hobbits are only interesting. Like, it's a really nice way of saying hobbits are super boring. But he goes, hobbits are only interesting when they're put in very un-hobbit-like situations. You've got to put him in an un-hobbit-like situation. And that, for some reason, just like made the light bulb go off. And he went, I got to go. I'll be back. He jumped up and ran. And he like wrote feverishly for like a week, the entire thing, start to finish.
That's amazing.
And the first thing he said was, okay, well, if I don't want this to be Gandalf, what's the opposite of Gandalf? Black Rider. And that's how the Black Riders were born. Before that, he didn't even have any conception of the Black Riders. And so it's just kind of interesting to hear that he went through it too, and then he figured it out. So I don't know if that would be helpful, but maybe put Cameron in a very un-Cameron-like situation, you know?
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting idea. I'm going to think about it, because what is an un-Cameron-like situation?
Well, it has to be anything that's outside her comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with Gadrin today, so Gadrin hates everybody. He hates dragons. He hates people. So we're putting him in a situation where he has to bond on a really intimate level with this you know what I mean? That is like the worst thing that could possibly happen to him in his mind, even though most of us are going, oh, that'd be cool. You know? Not for Gadrin. That's a very un-Gadrin-like situation.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
I
in that
love
sense,
this
that's kind
idea.
of why you need to know your characters so well, because you're not going to know
Mhm.
what that is for them unless you know what is it they do want, what is it they don't want, and then just basically throw a wrench in it, you know?
Yeah.
So
Okay. Okay. That's really actually amazing insight. And having just like Landon and I literally just watched The Lord of the Rings, so it's like I feel this. All right. Well, I have a lot to think about. Hmm. But it's going to come together.
It will. In the writing, it will
Always
come
does.
together. It
Hmm.
always does.
Always does, as long as I don't give up,
Right.
and I don't intend to.
I don't understand people that can like stop writing for years and never finish their manuscript. That would drive me batty.
Yeah, and I mean, I have several that I've never finished, but it's because they weren't going anywhere to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they just weren't the books that were supposed to be finished, but this is one that I cannot stop writing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
That's what
I
I mean.
don't get
Like
it
people who
either.
write like 150 pages and then are like, oh, I put this in a drawer like 20 years ago. And it's like,
What? You
yeah,
didn't keep thinking about it? Because I still keep thinking about all those other unfinished stories.
yeah. You don't sit around obsessing about old manuscripts. I don't think you're really a writer.
Seriously.